Hello, and thank you for joining me on another episode of the Tech Exec podcast where we triple your impact per engineer. I'm your host, Aviv Ben-Yosef, advisor and consultant to tech execs worldwide. And our subject today is one too many. Before we get to that, let me tell you that my new book, Capitalizing Your Technology to Disrupt and Dominate Your Markets, is available for pre-order right now. See the link in the show notes. If you purchase a copy during the pre-order, even a single one, you'll get a free benefit, and if you get more, you get some more. There's also a 20% off coupon code there. So check it out, what you've got to lose. And let's talk about one too many. Something I see with executives as their companies grow is that they fail to realize how to restructure their one-on-ones in a way that retains their connection with the team, but that doesn't bog down too much of their calendar. For example, if you're a co-founder, you might be used to having one-on-ones with virtually everyone in the company to a degree, and when you started having it be once a week or once every 2 weeks was okay. But as you grow and all of a sudden you have 20 people in the company, of which you manage directly only a handful, trying to maintain that is going to be costing you a lot. And I think that being aware of this and starting to take control of your calendar and starting to change up the schedule is completely fine. So first of all, your one-on-ones, the skip level one-on-ones, the one-on-ones that are not with the people who directly report to you, are perfectly fine, not happening every week or two. This is something that has to happen eventually. I know some people feel bad about this. I know you might be fearing that your founding team, your first employees might feel like they're being demoted or getting less attention because all of a sudden they don't get as much freely available access to you. But this is part of growing up. This is something that has to happen in order for you to be able to do your job, because having one-on-ones is not solely that. And I recently talked to two clients about this. One of them a CEO, the other a VP, and both of them I asked a very straightforward question. Look at your one-on-ones with the skip levels and consider how many of them do you regularly feel like provide the other party with value and provide you with something you didn't know or improve the relationship considerably, and what would have happened had you changed the schedule. So for example, you might notice that when you're not the direct manager of someone, having a one-on-one every 2 or 3 weeks might mean that there's not a lot to really talk about. Some people do need to vent or have a lot to share, but most people, from my experience, just end up chit-chatting a bit, which is nice. But if it's just mainly chit-chatting, you don't need to do that so often, or you can change the time frame. Instead of it being 30 minutes every 2 weeks, what about grabbing coffee with them every 3 or 4 weeks and just having 15 minutes? Once you start doing these alterations to the cadence and to the duration, you'll see that you gain a lot more time, and actually people start treating it a bit differently because the time itself with you becomes more valuable, as opposed to having 30 minutes every 2 weeks, which I don't really need all of them. If it's 15 minutes every 3, 4, 5 weeks, all of a sudden I might actually have an agenda prepared when I'm going to sit down with the CEO finally. And I believe that's fine. You just have to be cognizant of two factors. One, if you feel like there's an area in the company that's struggling, try and up the cadence a bit. So talk to people more frequently. For example, if you just had to replace one of your VPs, I think it's perfectly fine to speak to people on the team a bit more often for a while until you see that the dust is settled, that things are now better. Second, do be aware that if every time you sit down, people really have a lot of things to tell you, they have a bunch of questions, or you feel like, oh, why didn't I hear about this a week or 2 or 3 ago? Then that might mean that you need to create different avenues of communication because your communication as a whole in the company is lacking. Most of the times, as a CEO, as a co-founder, as an executive, you shouldn't feel like these skip levels provide you with a lot of information you didn't have, or that the people were sitting on questions for a while waiting to ask them. You should have different ways for communication to happen. So for example, consider, why haven't they asked their bosses? Is this something that really should have waited to happen with you directly? Or are you meeting the team as a whole regularly, because I do believe that there's a difference between having a company-wide all hands and have people ask you questions, as opposed to every month or two sitting down with a different team for a sort of a retrospective, for them to show you what they've been working on for the past couple of months and ask you directly a bunch of questions as a team where you answer to all of them together. Because sometimes it's very helpful for other people to see what others in the team ask, because many people might have the same question. And if each one of them asks you one-on-one, it's a waste of time. But actually, even more importantly, I see that many people don't even have the guts or know if it's okay to ask a certain question that one person on the team will ask. And having all of them listen in on that answer is worthwhile. So the solution is not purely having one-on-ones. Try and find the right composition and play with the cadence, with the duration, so that you find something where you hit an equilibrium. You don't feel like people are being starved for attention. You don't feel like your calendar is just too full with one-on-ones. Find the sweet spot. And by the way, this is something that you have to review every couple of months or so as your company grows, as the team structure changes, because as I said, there are going to be times where you want to do it more often with a certain part of your company, and times where you realize things have matured enough and you can now distance yourself a bit more. And this is, again, simply to help you gain some more sanity and control of your calendar and ensure that the time you spend with your people is well spent, because having meetings for the sake of having meetings is not what we're about. That's it for this week. I'm reminding you to check out the link to the new books pre-order website in the show notes. And also, if you haven't yet, do subscribe to my newsletter. It's the best newsletter for tech executives, and it's free. Thank you. Talk soon.